Ako ang inyong kakampi na si Puting Pinoy. Appear tayo. Upsh! At ngayon ang talakayin natin ay mga pagbatikos ng ating celebrated na si Johnny Antillon at papanorin natin kung ano ang mga sinabi niya, mga pagbatikos niya laban sa America, USA, yung bansa ko. So, tingnan natin kung anong palagay niya sa mga bagay-bagay sa US pagkatapos ng ilang announcements. So, saglit ang mga kakampi. Okay. And by the way, maraming salamat sa mga early bird kakampis, si kakamping Luan. Maraming salamat. And ito. So, siyempre, tulad ng ito, tingnan ko. Maraming i-bring up ko muna sila. Okay. Tingnan natin ito. Monetization. Yeah. Oops. Okay. Itong mga kakampi, maraming salamat sa atin mga oops, bakit hindi nakikita? Saglit lang. Babasahin ko na lang this time. Joy Casimir, Cherilyn Gunda, and Wellboy TV. Kung gusto nyong maging involved or to join the channel, malaking tulong yan para sa akin kakampi para may pagpatuloy yung mga videos na ito. So, ngayon, we'll go ahead and quick reminder para sa lahat na nanonood dyan is magaganap ang mga live streams na ito. As much as possible, susubukan natin gawin tuwing bawat gabi, but I'm thinking at least 4 to 6 times a week. So, abangan ninyo yan. That's going to be every evening on weekdays, 6 p.m. I think yung itinakda nating oras, I think that'll be good. And also, magmungkahi kayo. Kung may gusto nyong panorin na talakayin ko or i-react natin, sabihan nyo na lang ako mga kakampi. So, okay. Ngayon, we're going to go ahead and jump right into this. Alrighty. At ito na. So, interested talaga ako kung anong sasabihin ni Johnny Antillon. Siyempre, bilang isang American, may mga idea ako tungkol sa diba, US. And interested ako kung anong insights niya. So, panoorin na natin. Mayroon tayong mga tao taga-Israel, France, UK, and USA. At ito na.
Homes of American high school students, going to classes with them, being walking textbooks, if you will, with a full program of school activities during the daytime, and I understand community and teenage activities after that. We're going to be talking about some of the misconceptions there are around the world about America, some of the misunderstandings, some of the criticisms, and the reasons for them. This half hour is simply a chance to give you an idea of what goes on for much longer than half-hour periods when this group of 32 students or any portion of the group gets together. First, here is Peter Hudson from the UK. He lives in Newcastle. Shortly after he was born, though, Peter was taken to Hong Kong, where his father was in government service. And when the war broke out, he and his mother were separated from his father, who spent the whole war as a prisoner of war. Peter and his mother were in refugee camps in the Philippines. Later lived in Australia, finally got back to England just as the war ended. Peter is now head prefect of his school and a champion debater. Next is Johnny Antillon of the Philippines. Johnny hasn't taken very good advantage of his educational opportunities. He can only speak 9 out of the 86 languages in the Philippines and the some
Nine.
200 dialects that they speak. He's also, just a minute, John. He's also
Wow,
going
ang
to miss his
galing mga
graduation exercises
kakampi.
on April
Siya mga alam niyang wika. Ang galing.
1st in the Philippines. Too bad, because he's valedictorian of his class, chairman of the debating society, editor of the school newspaper, president of the student council, and I can't tell you how much else. We're sorry, you'll miss it, Johnny. You'll be on a plane on the way home. Next is Nurit Auerbach from Israel. Nurit's parents came to Israel from Germany. She was born there in Haifa 17 years ago.
Oh,
Isn't that right?
wow.
Right.
So,
Representing
tumakas sila
United States
from
students
Germany.
is John Kriz, who's a senior at Princeton High School, that is, and John is 18. Well, all right. What about some of these criticisms of the United States that are current in your countries? How about you starting, Peter?
Oh, yes. First of all, the one big criticism is that Americans try to live their life as though they were working an assembly line. Another one is that they try to run international politics like big business. They tend to see things in black and white instead of as Britain sees them in black, grays, and then down to white. They tend to try and make big decisions and heal things with a quick stroke of the pen, whereas Britain allows time to take a big part. And the third fault we find is that very few Americans are able to differentiate between socialism and communism, which makes it rather difficult for me as an Englishman coming from a welfare state.
Well, those are 3 points, certainly, Peter. How about you, Nuri?
As for me, I couldn't understand at first that the Jews here are, first of all, American and then Jew. It was very difficult for me to understand, as an Israeli, how any Jew could live in any foreign country.
By the way, pagdating sa sinabi ng British guy ni Peter, I'd say, yeah, may katotohanan naman siguro pagdating sa pamahalaan is like, agad-agad, ayusin na. Like, yeah, I think that's a tendency of the U.S. government for sure. And seeing things in black and white. Not so much na ngayon,
after
but
what has happened in the Second World War. And, well, it was rather difficult for me to realize that.
How about you, Johnny? We've heard from the Middle East and Western Europe now. How about the Voice of Asia?
Well, speaking for the Asians, I can say that some of the points that bring the greatest resentment between America and the Asians are these. First of all, you have a desire to run everything from the Asian point of view. And second, you bring with you an aura of superiority which greatly infuriates most Asians. You have a smugness, a complacency that infuriates us and makes us think that you consider yourself the best people on the top of this world.
Yeah.
And then the other point is that you have so much inconsistency in your foreign policy all over the world that most Asians do not know what to expect from the United States. We live from day to day in a state of jitters, not knowing whether today you're friends with us and tomorrow you sell us down the river. And then the fourth point is that in helping us, we believe that there are catches. There's a catch in everything you do. I will not say that this is true, but we believe it very much.
Actually, I think totoo yan. Like, I think like laging may tit for tat yung tit for tat, ibig sabihin kung may ibibigay ka, may aasahan ka pa rin sa taong yun. And I could say na para sa karamihan ng mga Americans, siguro totoo yan. Pero para sa akin, I mean, marami nga akong ginawa. In fact, kung minsan ako mismo yung nalulugi sa buhay ko, you know. So I can't say na lahat ng mga Amerikano ganyan. Pero pagdating sa pagyabang, ulit, wag natin nilahat. Pero karamihan, tulad ng mga makikita sa TV, kung minsan may mga Amerikano na talagang, oh, America is the greatest. Ganon sila, and ako, hindi ako kabilang doon. I find na maraming iba't ibang issue sa US ngayon, lalong-lalo pagdating sa racism and inequality. I mean, marami naman progressive things that are happening sa US na maganda. But ganun din, maraming issue din na nangyayari tulad ng racism, tulad ng mga discrimination and prejudice. So yeah.
Yes, Peter.
One misunderstanding between Britain and America, most British people love to laugh
Yes.
at Americans. We love to laugh at your
Henry
gun-chewing
Ford and Ray
habits.
Kroc are
The
perfect
fact that
examples.
teenagers
Tama.
take so much importance about dating. Well, it's psychological. We need the psychological uplift. By laughing at the Americans, we cheat ourselves into thinking that we're your equals in power.
I wonder if that fairly penetrating observation is applicable elsewhere in the world.
I wouldn't say that, for instance, not in Asia, because Asians have never felt that we needed psychological tricks in order to place ourselves on a par with America or any other country.
Mhm.
We believe that we have points where we're superior and that we do not have to look for other points where we're inferior. We recognize that there are some points where you're high, some points where we are high, some points where you are low, and some points where we
Yeah,
are low.
totoo. Give and take.
Would
Give
you
and
say
take
that that
talaga.
feeling
Yeah.
of superiority is just as prevalent among Asians, their superiority, as you find the Westerners feel their own superiority?
Yes, in fact, you mentioned that now when an incident comes to my mind. I met a boy one time from the Western Hemisphere, I shall say. I shall not mention names. And one night he told me while we were in the same room that he considered most Asians as racially inferior, mentally inferior, psychologically inferior, physiologically inferior
Grabe.
per se. And it struck me, it surprised me, because just a few years ago, I had heard a Burmese boy use almost exactly the same words.
A boy from Burma
From Burma.
Wow.
used the same word.
That is
What
right.
did he say?
He said that you were immature, shallow, unperceiving, unperceptive, and words like that.
And that the Asians were the superior ones.
That is right.
Well, one way of finding out whether we are or not is getting together and knowing each other. But what's your point about feeling that there's a catch in everything Americans do in Asia? I'd like you to...
The Asians look at the United States helping other countries in this way. In helping other
Para
countries,
makikinabang
you make them
sila.
so strong that they become powerful competitors or may
Mhm.
become powerful rivals. Now, this is like slicing your own throat. We can hardly believe that you would do this without some ulterior motive, so that we believe that anything you give with the right hand must in some way be shadowed with the left.
Hmm.
Now, wait a minute, Johnny.
Well,
By the way, mga kikampi, kung gusto nyo mangiwan kayo ng mga comments ninyo, pagkatapos ng panonood natin, talakayin natin. Gusto kong malaman ano ba yung mga criticisms, pagpatikos, or pakikaalam nyo tungkol sa US. At susubukan kong sagutin sa aking pananaw. And yeah, I think isa sa mga sinabi niya about that inferiority, sobrang hindi, yan ang isang bagay na ayaw ko sa, you know, mga bagay na yun pagdating sa US. I will say this though, kung minsan naranasan ko rin na kahit hindi ako mayabang, kahit hindi ako nagyayabang, kung minsan may tao na ipapalagay niya or ipaproject niya yung concept na mayabang ako. Kaya kung anong sasabihin ko, akalain nila na, ang yabang mo. Like tulad ng pumunta ako sa PLDT once. And simple lang yung tanong ko kasi di ba alam naman ninyo mga kikampi na nahirapan talaga ako sa pagkukuha ng Wi-Fi for I think like 3.5 months. So anyway, may tanong ako, like follow-up lang ako kasi it had been like 2 months, 2.5 months na hindi pumunta sa bahay yung PLDT. And mahaba yung pila. So, ayaw ko naman maghintay. Like, wala akong oras. So, tinanong ko yung guard kung mayroon paraan, may number ba na pwedeng mag-follow up ako sa number or whatever. Pero yung guard, parang automatically inassume niya na nagyayabang ako, na gusto ko na paunahan ako sa pila. Kahit hindi talaga, gusto ko lang na ano ba yung follow-up system para makikapunta na sila sa bahay ko. It had been 2.5 months. So may mga halimbawa din kung minsan kung paano may mga stereotypes tayo or may mga preconceived notions tayo tungkol sa isang tao na nakabatay sa lahi nila, and then ipapalagay natin yung pananaw na yun sa kanila kahit hindi man totoo. So I think it's important din na suriin din natin ang sariling pag-iisip natin about that, kung totoo nga ba for every person, and to what degree can racism or discrimination or prejudice makapasok dahil sa ganyan pag-iisip na pangkalahatan or yung generalizations.
You're knitting your brow, John?
Well, I don't quite see that the way he says this, there are misunderstandings on both parts, and yet I don't quite think that he says that we do everything with an ulterior motive. But then, don't we treat, when we find our own neighbors in trouble, don't we treat them in exactly the same way in which we help the other peoples of the world who are less fortunate than we?
By the way, when I said I did not use that I believe it. I said that is the general feeling in Asia, that there is something, a catch in all your motives and in all your purposes in Asia, and for that matter, throughout the world. You see, it may or it may not be true, but it is a fact that such a feeling exists and persists, and that is one of the greatest points that separates the East from the West.
I'm sorry, go ahead, John.
Well, what are you going to do about it? Do you think you can do something to dispel this?
To dispel this is not our part. Since we suspect you, it is for you to make advances. Or to do something that will to believe you more, to trust you more, to feel that you're capable and worthy of our trust and confidence.
Magandang punto
For
yun.
example, Johnny, we've been giving a great deal of aid to Asia.
Yes, but you see, I will tell you. When you give aid sometimes to countries, you come there with that air, where you say, well, our way is best.
Talakayin natin mamaya,
Your way is not so good. And if you don't take our way, well, that's just too bad. But you see how you backward people, you don't know what you're doing. We know what we are doing. In other words, there are times when they force aid upon us at a time when we do not like it. Or if they do not force aid upon us, you sometimes give us this aid without giving us a chance to participate in helping to build ourselves.
That's what I meant. I was saying that America tended to employ international politics.
I'll clarify that point. For instance, in the few years after the war, you helped other countries and you gave them large gifts. But you should remember a wise saying that charity has a bitter taste. And you gave it as if you're giving out alms. But today you have a better program, I think. You give us a chance where we put up 50% of everything you give. And that makes us feel much better.
Yeah.
It gives us a feeling that we're participating in this program of helping ourselves.
Totoo din yan, di ba? Kasi self-reliance nga. Like kung, ano ba yung old adage? Like, kung magbibigay ka ng isda, kakain siya ng isang pagkain. Kung tinuruan mo ang tao na mangisda, makikikain siya habang buhay. And so I think yan ang tinatalakay ni kakamping Johnny Antillon. Sabihin natin, kakampi natin siya.
Feelings of distrust toward America. Is that true also? Do you also distrust British motives?
Musta
or is it
kakampi?
just America?
I would like to bring out the fact that one primary reason for our distrust of America is our distrust for Britain and France and all those countries who went to Asia and exploited their poor little brown brothers.
I won't say we exploited them. They had raw materials that they didn't know how to use. We went in, we gave them a lot of things, but we took back in return. That's why when America gives you so much, gives Asia so much, the Asians think they must want something in return. Now what is it?
Now look, Peter, when you say that you go to Asia and you didn't exploit it, what do you mean? Look, when you went to Malaya, for instance.
Yes.
Did
Or
you give them
to
a chance
India.
to be educated on the same level? Did you give them public school educations? Did you give them a chance to be educated in technical schools? Yes, you said you're educating them now. But now it's too late.
Yeah.
You've allowed the distrust and mistrust to build
Yeah.
up.
Yan ang problema. Naiintindihan ko talaga yung sinasabi ni Johnny dito kasi parang isang issue ito sa US na nangyayari kung saan yung parang nagbibigay ng, I guess yung tinatawag na glass ceiling, like may hangganan, like kalimitan yung yung magagawa ng tao. So I feel like ganun nga yung ginawa ng mga ibang colonizers, mga colonizers in general, is ginawa nila yung bare minimum para may angat yung society to advance it with technology or whatever. Pero they did the bare minimum para hindi magiging makapantay. And I think that's the biggest issue. And then siempre yung treating it like a business and using it as an opportunity to exploit and to take advantage of resources.
I admit, that was Victorian and Georgian and Edwardian England.
Whether it was Victorian, Edwardian,
That's
or
before
Georgian
my
England, I'm not
I
blaming
accept
you.
no responsibility for what my country did before I was born.
All right, I'll merely say that those facts did exist, and those facts still color our present
I
relations.
grant you.
Yes.
I don't want to cut off your discussion on British imperialism, but Eric out there is simply dying. Yes, Eric's here. Eric's our delegate from France. He wasn't on the program, but he's here in the studio, and he's been having apoplexy out here. And I think, all right, Eric, come on in. Tell us what you want to say. You might as well get it off your chest.
Well, I think you have failed to mention one of the very basic criticisms that I've noticed here. There's something that European and I think especially French people cannot understand. It's your fear of solitude. Here people hate being alone. In one of my family, I had misfortune to say that I adored being by myself. Well, they almost sent me to a mental doctor. And here, when you can enjoy yourself and enjoy comfort of leisure and solitude, you don't do it. You get another job, you join another club. If you get a job, it's to get more material comfort, to get more money. And that's thing that we cannot understand. And another point which I noticed here is that, how could I say that?
Say it in French.
Why?
Well, I can translate it. Go ahead.
Oh, gee.
Well, you've given us a mouthful already. If you think of the other one, tell us. But this...
Eric, I don't quite see that. Have you ever been with an American when he was alone?
No, I don't know how I could, but I've never seen. I've lived in some American families, but I have never seen an American being alone.
Oh, no. Sa pamilya ko, halos lahat kami sa pamilya ko, like, medyo kanya-kanya kami sa pamilya ko, sa paglaki ko. Like, that was, hindi ko alam kung bakit, but I know, nung dumating ako dito sa Pilipinas, yun ang isa sa mga culture shock ko, ay sobrang emphasized yung, sama-sama, basta marami, masaya. Para sa akin, pag marami, parang napapanic attack or na-anxiety na. I mean, hindi naman ganoon palagi, but for me, mas preference ko na yung mga ilan tao lang na comfortable ako sa kanila. Like, mas gusto ko na quality friendships kaysa quantity friendships and quantity hangouts. Siyempre, gusto ko rin yung mga salo-salo kung minsan. Pero para sa akin, I value yung oras ko na magpahinga and mag-isip at makaroon ng kunting katahimikan.
Unless you peep through a
Nang
keyboard,
mag-isa.
maybe.
That's what I'm here for. I must look things I shouldn't see.
Well,
Eric, perhaps it's this strong feeling of individualism among French people. Perhaps it's this
Sobrang
the reason
hina
for
ng
your
pananalita
weak,
niya.
your weak government. Don't you think so?
Yes,
Whoa!
it might be that, but I think from my,
Sinabi ba
that's
niya
my
weak
own personal
government?
point of view, I think in United States they are killing the individual and trying to make people live in a group. They don't care about the individual. In my country, we care about the individual. See?
Oh, yes.
Maybe it's worse for the government. It certainly is, but I like better that than living in a group and having nothing, which really belongs to myself.
Don't
Yes.
you think, Eric, that if you follow this individualism to its logical conclusion, you will soon lead yourself into a state of, shall I say, anarchy? Or a state where 80 million people have 80 million parties and they can't agree on one single darn thing?
There's only 40 million people in France.
Only 40 million parties.
40 million.
Well, I don't fully agree with that. Like yung individualism, hindi ibig sabihin na walang common goal, walang commonality. Like pwedeng may common goal ka, may common interest ka, pero yung individualism mas nakafocus lang yan kung ano bang gusto mong gawin. Like, apektuhan ka ba ng ibang tao? Halimbawa, sa pamilya ko, yung mga magulang ko, dahil sa individualism na ito, supportive talaga sila sa aking pagiging YouTuber. Halimbawa, you know, it's not about yung collective, kung paano kami magiging successful collectively, kundi kung may pangarap ako, kung may pangarap ang kapatid ko, kung may pangarap yung isang tao, magtutulungan para makamtan or makamit yung pangarap na yun.
Yes.
What do you want to say, John?
Well, look, Eric, you have to understand that America is a composite of all sorts of national groups.
And yes, it
and
is.
so
Totoo
on.
din yan.
We came here. We couldn't encourage individualism. Otherwise, all these groups which you see here today, mostly blended, would be still individual groups. We wouldn't have the solidarity of our country. We wouldn't be what we are today.
Unfortunately,
The main
may
point of
issue
our
yung solidarity
education,
na
you
yun.
might say, is to make good citizens.
Yeah.
We haven't been concentrating on making individuals, because making individuals would have killed America in its crucial stage in its existence.
And what about the implications from the rest of you? What about the implications of Eric's point that we care too much about that everybody likes to be alike? We care too much about the common man, and that the person, the real individual, the uncommon man, if you will, doesn't get enough chance. Do you think that's true?
I think that in some way it could be true. I could point to one instance, for instance, in your public school education. You put so much emphasis on mass education, and you put double the emphasis on mass that you do on education. You allow students to club the public schools without dividing them according to their mental ability. So what happens? You put a genius and a moron in the same class. And what happens? In order for the class to proceed in a sane manner, you have to cater down to the moron, with the result that you pour down this poor genius, make him frustrated, give him very little chance to advance. And you know that there is nothing that stifles intelligence so much as restriction.
Strangling the intelligent person in
That's
the
right.
embryo.
So that you might see
no.
that there is a sort of educational suffocation in America.
I think I have to
It's a good point.
a defender of the American system. I haven't noticed that. I think that the American system gives the opportunity to the more advanced pupils. Once I've noticed the honor classes in the schools I've visited.
Yeah, mayroon
I've
din
noticed the advanced
honor classes.
which for the math advanced, they give the more gifted pupils the opportunity to get much more that what they can get.
Actually, this is not true, because except for a few exceptional schools like science schools, when they are the rare exceptions, you find that pupils are admitted any regard for mental ability, no grading into A, B, C, D, or E, and no adjustment of teaching ability to the type of mentality you have.
Johnny, and
Johnny,
sorry, go ahead.
How much do you know about this? Have you made an extensive survey of this?
I wouldn't call it an extensive survey, but as you know, in sampling opinion, you do not necessarily have to ask everybody, but you get a cross-section of opinions. So what I did was to talk to several principals, ask them if this method of giving entrance examinations in public schools is a widespread or a national practice.
Yeah,
And they said
mahirap
no.
talaga
Except for certain
pag-usapan
schools,
yung
like vocational
education
schools,
system.
where they have to
It's
judge your aptitude. Those are the
difficult.
only kinds of schools where they give you entrance examinations. So you see, I sampled educational authority, people who ought to know.
Johnny.
gusto ko na nagtanggol siya sa sarili niya. Like I nakita ko rin yung punto ng Amerikano niya yan, pero that was good. Kasi tama naman din si
We
Johnny
come
dyan.
back to one or two of your points of criticism in Asia of the United States and criticism in Western Europe of the United States. From where do you get most, or do your people get most of their information about the United States?
I think one of the main source of the information they get is the movies.
Oh, yeah.
The movies, that's
yeah.
one. Now what else?
And
Saglit lang. So, gusto kong talakayin ito. I think mass education, I don't think yung issue ay mass education, kundi yung, like, I think kung by mass education, ibig mong sabihin, like, walang specialization. Issue yan, di ba? Like, yung mga education systems are designed specifically para sa industrial era, well, mahigit 200 years na tayo nakalampas doon. So, dapat ang bawat tao, ang bawat student may curriculum na tama para sa kanya, at hindi basta, like, di ba, may hangganan yung bawat paksa, yung bawat course na makukuha mo. Pag, di ba, iba't iba yung mga intelligences, like, maaring yung isang tao sobrang galing sa music. So, bakit pipilitin siya na laging math ang pag-aaralan niya? Hindi ba pwede mas focus siya sa music, sa kanyang education? Or halimbawa, tulad ko, mahilig ako sa music and film. So, hindi ba mas maganda kung mayroon akong focus sa film and music sa aking education? Diba? So, parang gano'n ang iniisip ko tungkol dyan. Tingnan natin. So, sa tingin ko, hindi lang naman yan ang pagsasama-sama ng mga students ang kailangan. Nasa teaching method din kasi I agree, mahirap pag-usapan ng education system kasi kahit sa, dito, problema pa rin yan. Yeah, it's difficult. Pero pagdating sa academically challenged, like, ano ba ang ibig sabihin noon? Isa sa mga theories of intelligence says that I believe there are 9 different intelligences. So, di ba, kung isang tao is very logical pagdating sa math, pero paano kung yung pinaka skill level nila ay walang kinalalaman sa math? They're going to feel like they're stupid. Tatawagin silang stupid. Pero kung tutuusin, matalino din sila, pero sa ibang bagay. May mga tao din na mahirap matuto. Pero hirap matuto siguro dahil either could be because of learning styles, and it could also be like, you know, like maraming iba't ibang dahilan kung bakit mahihirapan ang isang estudyante na matuto. Maaring hindi hilig nila yung subject, diba?
I don't think it's a very good and very true source of information.
What about current affairs? How do you get information about current events in America?
Isang bagay din yan,
For
Kakampi.
most Asian countries, we get our information about America, her domestic policies and her foreign policies from American magazines. And I'm not trying to give a plug for any of them, but without mentioning, you have Life, you have the Herald Tribune, let us say, the New York Times, or Reader's Digest, or Coronet. And you see?
But I was thinking, it's in your newspapers. Do they come from the regular press agencies?
Yes,
Yeah.
but a lot of British newspapers, of course, have correspondents in Washington and New York.
What about
I think
government?
the whole of the free world watches every move that Washington makes. It's the political barometer of the free world.
Yeah, tama,
I think
Kakampi.
it is, Johnny.
Siguro gagawa tayo ng video tungkol dyan. Gusto
don't
niyo
agree with
mga
that?
Kakampi?
I would say that.
Why not?
So,
Barometer in what sense?
if America decides on one thing, then it's advisable for the rest of the free world to
Sa
sort of
ngayon,
tag along
kakampi.
behind America, because America's paying out so much to the rest of the free world in aid.
Oh my
That's
God.
probably the catch.
Oh, but
No.
Peter, we don't pay it out. We don't expect to be dished back something in return. What we realize that we are more fortunate than a lot of peoples in the world, and we try to help them. We don't dish it out in expectation of getting something in return.
Yes, but there is that mistrust, as Johnny said.
Mhm.
All the money's coming in with the right hand. You've got to watch the shadow of the left hand.
Yeah.
That's what I think the shadow of the left hand might be.
You've given quite a lot of trenchant criticisms of the United States, and John is outnumbered here, 4-1.
Sorry.
Would it be fair to ask you what you think about some American reactions, such as, why on earth, with all the help we've given to Europe, doesn't she get together in some sort of an EDC? And when is Asia ever going to start getting some kind of Asian federation so that the countries can work together? Is that a fair question?
Certainly. I will answer
you.
for Asia.
Good.
Now, you ask me, when is Asia going to get an Asian federation? That time will come when each country in Asia is confident that being a member of an Asian federation will guarantee her not being dominated by another Asian country.
Yeah. Mayroon kaya
Look
mga
to the
Asian
future.
Federation
What-
ngayon, mga kakampi? I know we have the Asian Games, pero mayroon kaya pagdating sa mga political and governmental mga federations?
Long-term future are you looking for?
We're looking toward the time when we can disregard countries like India, because look, if they go into a federation, an Asian federation, they will naturally dominate that federation.
Yeah,
and we don't
Asia.
like that. We want to wait. We want to wait until the time when we're strong enough
ASEAN.
to be able to tell India where to get off. And we and we think that they isn't far off. Today we prefer unilateral agreements with the United States, single agreements where we can trust the United States. At least my country can.
Well, we hope you have the time. Of course, I'm guilty of what Peter says all Americans are guilty of, wanting to get things done in a hurry. But do you sincerely think that the threat is so slight that you will have all this time to wait?
You know, that is one thing. Most Asian countries live so near communist China, and communist China is daily growing a greater menace. And yet, there is less fear in most Asian countries of communism than I have noticed in America. Or at least, we do not publicize communism so much in the Philippines or in other Asian countries as much as you do in the United States.
Is it because your Magsaysay has gotten rid and has found a good solution to get rid of communists in the Philippines?
Yes. Now, when I say this, I'm speaking entirely for Filipinos. You see, when you have a sense of security at home, you're inclined to feel secure about the rest of the world. So that when President Magsaysay lessened the threat of communism to such a great extent in the Philippines, we feel much secure now, more secure.
Is it fair to ask now about this European Federation? Eric's over there too. He ought to give you some support.
Oh, saglit lang. Basahin ko. Let's see here. Should be taught math in terms of how to earn income through music, or yeah, sang-ayon din naman ako dyan. At hindi para ibaba yung mga iba pang di ba, mga math, engineering, science. Like lahat ng mga tao dapat may basic knowledge pagdating sa mga bagay na yun. Ang punto ko lang is bakit sobrang nakafocus tayo na bobo yan. Pero kahit hindi talaga bobo, siguro hindi lang niya hilig or interest yung subject na yun. Baka mas magaling siya sa mga iba pang subjects, no?
Well, I think what Johnny told for Asia is quite true.
But yes,
We
to have
don't
it
want nations
tailored
to become too powerful in
would be
the
good.
European community. And I think what America is doing now,
Nakaakma.
it's to help a nation become much more powerful than the other one.
That is
It's right.
Oh, well, you know.
Germany. All right. But would you like to have a little more English help in what you are doing in European?
Sure. I think that England could make kind of balance between France and Germany.
Yes,
Could be the third country, which
that's called Britain. She's far more Commonwealth-minded.
Yeah.
I mean, we have garrisons in the Commonwealth. I know Johnny's just thinking they'll get rid of your Commonwealth. But we have a lot of countries in the Commonwealth who don't want us to get out, believe it or not. And we have garrisons in, well, let's just take here, Hong Kong. We have garrisons in Gibraltar. We have garrison in Suez. And if we sign a European Defence Community Pact, it means that we have a block of troops, a certain number of troops, which cannot be moved out of Europe. And we may need to move troops out of Europe. I don't think there's any real danger in Europe at present.
Yes,
I
Eric?
want to say something. We have the same thing all over the world, French people. We have troops in Morocco, in Indochina.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't see why we should do something that's going to weaken us on broad countries and lands. If you don't do it, it's really unfair, because we should defend Europe for you, and you shouldn't do anything in return, you see.
Oh, but we would defend Europe. Britain and America have promised that in the event of any immediate necessity or danger, they will send a supply of troops, as much as they would have if they signed a pact. We don't think a pact's necessary.
But do you really think there can be a European Defense Pact or any kind of European Union without Britain?
Well, you know, the Channel's a wonderful bank overdraft. I'm being very insular, but I think a lot of British people are insular.
Well, then, have we no hope of more European federation? You're making me very depressed, you two.
I don't see any need for any European defense community when you have North Atlantic Treaty Organization, because NEDC is just a block of NATO, which is forming a club.
Well, what about you, Eric? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm just asking, from what you two have been saying, I gathered the fact that one country is afraid to be less powerful than the other country. That's why I don't want to join the EDC.
Sure. The same with the Asian
But so what? Don't you trust each other? Aren't you
Yeah.
friends? Does it matter whether he's weaker or you are weaker? So long as you help each other, don't you
Yeah,
trust each other?
tama. Tama. That's true collaboration. At
Well, no.
pagkakaibigan.
No, well, we are.
Not very. I wouldn't say that. Beside, the Asian situation is different. Each country, most of the countries in Asia are trying to gain a distinct personality. So we cannot afford to join an
Most
amalgamation
of
at this time, because that would erase our personality entirely.
And you
I
don't
think that is
think
what we feel.
You don't think from what Eric said that France is trying to maintain a distinct personality of being individualistic
no.
and different?
They
I
can
think-
come in a federation because they already have distinct personalities of their own. It is just a meeting of friends. Whereas if Asians come together, Asian countries which are new, that would be just like running one piece of hot plastic into another hot piece of plastic, and we don't want that. We want to build a personality first and then join together.
Eric mentioned Indochina a moment ago. Have you got a 30-second solution for America as to what she should or shouldn't do in Indochina?
I won't say what America should do in Indochina. It's really out of my province. But I do want to say that the people of Indochina desperately want their own freedom, their own right to call their country their own. And I believe that if France would give them an equivocal answer to the effect that they will have Indochina once this war is won, you will get a lot more support from Indochina than you already have.
But Johnny, when will the war be won?
I'm not a prophet.
Well, isn't that more or less what happened in the Philippines? There was a serious communist menace in there until after the war, and the Filipinos really began to, the Americans left completely, and the Filipinos really began to deal with the problem themselves, and now Magsaysay seems to have it pretty much under control.
That is true, John. Because when America left us to remove the communist threat in our own country, we had a country to fight for.
I'm sorry, that's a good note to end on. I think, in all fairness to the students,
We had a country
who
to
have,
fight for.
willingly expressed many of their criticisms of the United States for our edification. I ought to quote you in closing a word that Johnny said just a little while ago. He said one of the things that he likes best about the United States is that when you talk to people here about the future, they talk as if there was going to be one. Till next week, then, at the same time, this is Helen Waller saying good.
Maayos, maganda. So ano ba mga kakampi? Anong palagay nyo? Yep, live nagre-react kakampi. Tingnan natin ito. Okay, so bumalik tayo saglit sa, baliwalain. Yan ang salita na hinahanap ko kanina. Is wag natin baliwalain kung ano man yung mga kinakailangan talaga ng mga subjects. Pero wag din natin baliwalain yung katalinuhan ng bawat isa na lahat ng tao may katalinuhan talaga sila sa mga ibang bagay. And I find na medyo, like, siguro bobo ang isang tao, like, sa isang bagay. Pero pagdating sa ibang bagay, sobrang talino nila. Like, gaano katalino ba si, well, ito na lang. Basahin natin, Nikki Campiel, Cubega. Tama po, wala naman talagang bobo as long as we can do what we have to develop our knowledge in some other means and ways. Mayroon lang talagang mahina, pero nakakahabol kapag willing mag-progress. Yes, tama. So pwedeng mag-progress yung mga tao, pwedeng makaroon ng pag-unlad. Gustong-gusto ko din yung punto ni Johnny sa end, 'di ba, sa bandang dulo, yung sinabi yung na-quote ng moderator. Is pag nag-uusap, parang may kinabukasan talaga. And I think yan ang mahalaga. Wala naman perpekto. Maraming issue na nangyayari ngayon. But, dahan-dahan, pwedeng ayusin. So mga kakampi, mangiwan kayo sa comments ang mga idea niyo tungkol sa America or mga iba pang discussion ideas na gusto niyo. And yeah, tatalakay natin yun in the end. Oh, tingnan natin yung mga comments dito. It's always fun to look at the comment section. Palakihin natin ng konti. It's crazy how 70 years on, Americans are still ignorant about thinking they're the best. Yeah, I agree with that criticism. Like, medyo nakikringe din ako pag may mga ibang American ako na narinig ko sila tapos sinasabi nila na parang pinaka the best yung US. Pero kung tutuusin din, sa totoo lang, ayaw ko pag anumang country nagsasabing sila yung pinaka-best because paano masusukat yan at wala ka pang karanasan sa ibang bansa kung di ba, yung mga taga-China na hindi lumabas ng bansa nila kailanman, like paano nila masasabi na sila yung pinakamagaling, pinakamalakas, pinakaganito, ganyan. Like yan lang ang lagi ko isinaisip noon is paano kung masasabi or paano kung ma-qualify ang isang bagay na matukoy ito na yan ang pinaka-the best. I mean, medyo mahirap yan para sa akin. Lahat naman may kahinaan, lahat naman may kalakasan. I feel like my IQ is finally able to reach double digits. Oh my gosh, if you didn't have a double digit, like a 9 IQ, mahirap yan. Back in the day where you won't need a proper American accent to speak formal English. Shout out to the fluent Filipino guy. I mean, hindi talaga kailangan ng sobrang perfect na accent, pag nagsasalita ng English. Of course, it's always fun to learn more and whatnot, pero hindi naman kailangan sobrang perfecto. At least for me, diba? Okay. Well, mga kakampi, nag-enjoy ako dito. Masaya naman yung natin. Yeah, there's a really nice insight that he has. May iba-ibang husay ang bawat tao. Minsan may magaling sa isang bagay, minsan yung iba hindi. Yes, tama. Sir Johnny has this sense of insight and foresight. Yes, indeed. Ang skills ay kailangan din ng knowledge. Pero may mga matutalino naman na mas natatalo pa na ng may mga skills. Yeah. Totoo naman yan. I mean, LeBron James. I mean, successful businessman naman siya. Pero bakit naman siya sikat ngayon? Diba yung basketball skills niya? Yung basketball skills lang. Like, sobrang yaman niya. Or kahit si Manny Pacquiao, diba? Sobrang galing niya pagdating sa boxing. You know? So, pwedeng makaroon ng magandang buhay kung ganun. So mga kakampi, and hello kakamping Ira. Ayaw kong patagalin ito. But bukas, I think talakayin natin, I think na sabi natin na talakayin natin yung 30 basic universal human rights, 30 universal basic human rights. Pero siguro sa susunod na lang, pag-isipan ko kung kailan natin gagawin yan. May idea ko pagdating sa prejudice, isang topics tayo ng mga makalumang videos. So I have an idea for a different one. But ganun pa rin, magsulat kayo, magmungkahi kayo kung anong gusto nyong talakayin natin sa susunod at sa mga susunod sa comment section pagkatapos ko tapusin or iwakas itong live stream na ito. So maraming salamat mga kakampi. Sana okay lang kayo dyan. At up your mga kakampi.